I want to share a little more information about my Bill Elliott race car today. Give you a closer look at the car, the way it's set up, what's in the car if you're interested. So I built this shop recently, just got done with it recently, and it's not completely done yet on the inside, but it's done enough to keep the car in out of the weather so it doesn't have to stay under a car cover outside. But I've learned a little more about this car since purchasing it. When I bought it, the warehouse that it was being stored in for 8 years, it was uncovered, just sat there. Nobody did anything with it for 8 years, and it just sat in this warehouse with a bunch of other cars. Prior to that, I was told by the guy that was housing it that it was an actual show car for steel equipment company, and that this car went to all around the country to steel dealerships, and was just on display to try to get customers to come in. The man that owned the car had passed away, so I never talked to him. I never got information from him on all the particulars of the car. So I was told it was a show car for steel. And I don't know for sure that it was, but it sounds like that's what the owner was told. So about the engine, I did find out, I was corresponding with a guy online that has a car just like this. It's a Bill Elliott race car. It's 1 year newer car that he purchased. And I sent him pictures of the engine, and he told me that the valve covers are Ernie Elliott valve covers, EEI. So he said that it's likely that this engine is an Ernie Elliott engine. Don't know that unless the engine's taken apart to look inside, but it's got EEI valve covers anyway. It has 2 ignition systems, like everybody knows about NASCAR race cars. Going to the back, I don't know anything else about the engine as far as the horsepower or anything. I have no idea. At the back of the car is where the fuel cell is. And when I bought the car, I pulled the fuel cell out, and you can see that it was pretty easy to pull out, which NASCAR cars are made easy to work on. So I just took those bolts out, pulled the fuel cell out. It did have foam in it, which most NASCAR fans know about the foam fuel cells to keep the fuel from sloshing around and the fuel pickup easier to take in all the fuel. But the foam was deteriorated bad, so I removed all the foam, cleaned it out really well. I didn't put foam back in because I'm not going to race the car. I just have it bought it because I could and have a little fun with it. And so there's no foam. I didn't put foam back inside. I filled it up with VP 110 racing fuel. There's the fuel nozzle that they would use to fuel up the car on pit road, and all they did was just remove the piece of fuel line that goes to the tank, and they just put a cap on it, so it was easier to fill it with fuel from a fuel can. The battery's here in the back. It looks like that was just added later, because I believe that the battery used to be mounted right here beside the driver's seat when the car actually raced, and maybe they moved it to the back to make it easier as a show car. I'm not sure. So I want to show you a little bit about the inside of the car. It's pretty basic. Again, it's in the 90s that this car, I'm assuming, was raced. I don't know that for sure, but they're not as fancy as the modern day NASCAR cars. But the toggle switch is on the left. I know that the ignition switch has to be on in order for the vehicle to start. The crossover switch on the right, it has a red line above it like the ignition switch. So I'm assuming that means it needs to be on when the car starts. So I've always done it. I did try to start the car without that on, and it started right up without it. So the car starts without whether the crossover switch is on or not. I'm assuming that maybe that's just for the second ignition box, because there's 2 ignition boxes. I'm not sure if it has to be on, but it starts either way. The fan switch in the middle is for the fans going to the radiator. There's 2 fans, and that does work because when I was running it back when I first bought it, it was still hot, and after it ran for 30 minutes, the water temperature got kind of high. I turned the fan on and it immediately cooled it off, so that works really well. The RPM gauge in the center does not work. The oil temperature gauge, I'm not really sure that it works. It does read a little bit when it's running, but it's I don't think it's accurate. The water temperature gauge does work. The oil pressure gauge does work. The fuel pressure does not work, and the volt gauge does not work. Those would probably be pretty easy to fix, but so behind the driver's seat is the oil heater. Since it's a dry sump oil system, and there's an oil tank back here, and that oil temperature gauge does work. So what I was told to do is plug in a 110 extension cord into the front. Just plug it in to have it plugged into power, and it starts heating the oil up, and sure enough, that oil temperature gauge does work. And I was told to heat the oil temperature up to 200 degrees before I try to start the car. And once that oil temperature is up to 200 degrees, I come to the front of the engine and I remove this belt from the oil pump on the front, and I put on a air ratchet right here and rotate this oil pump clockwise for about a minute, minute and a half, and it cycles that warm oil from the tank into the engine to get the warm oil in the engine. I was told to do that before you start the car, and then obviously put the belt back on the oil pump before I try to start the car, and start the car up, and it runs great. One thing I did find about this car, I did notice about the NASCAR Winston Cup sticker that's on both sides. It says 1999 R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. Does that mean that this body is a 1999, or at least the sticker was put on? Was this body raced in 1999? I'm not sure. But when I go back and look at photos of Bill Elliott racing in 99, he did have this paint scheme on his car. So it just makes sense that that the body is 1999. And I did find this tag on the roll cage, and it says MRE-34, which I was told is Melling Racing. It's a Melling Racing chassis, and it says 90-1 below that. So does that mean that this chassis is a 1990? Certainly Bill Elliott was with Melling Racing in 1990. So maybe the body of the car is a 99, and maybe the body was put on this chassis specifically to go to the steel dealerships as a show car. I don't know. So maybe this body never raced with this chassis. I don't know. Behind the driver's seat is I think it's a cooling box, because the hose that goes into the cooling box comes out here where the airflow goes in, and then the second hose is just laying loose, and I think it probably went to the driver's head or driver head area. So I know that was a long video. I hope you enjoyed it and got some insight into the car that I have. And I'm not a mechanic. If I just had the opportunity to buy this car, if anybody sees anything in this video and knows more about it than I do, then, and if I'm doing something wrong, let me know. If you see something that I said wrong, or and I'm obviously not an expert in these cars, let me know. I would love to take any information that somebody may have. And thanks for watching. I'll do a startup on the car here pretty soon and show a video of that, the startup procedure, and crank the car up. But thanks for watching.